in The Great Man, speaking of, I think it was Maxine, she says that she can't be distracted by her cell phone. She has her assistant help her out, with all the ins and outs of communicating while she's in her studio. Do you feel the same way as a writer? How do you stay focused? What are your your means to that end of writing?
I don't talk on the phone. I don't turn on my ringer. When I'm writing a book, I don't go out or see anyone. I become, in effect, a hermit, like one of my characters. And I think it's the only way to write in a sustained way, is to get the outside world as much away as possible. And there are writers, I've heard of them, I know some, who, after a day's writing, go out, get drunk, see their friends, have fun. They talk on the phone during the day. They maintain a sort of balance between life and writing that I've never been able to have. It's one or the other. And for the time that it takes to write a book, I essentially am a recluse. I disappear. It's necessary. I don't know how it's very interesting to me, the people who can do it.
So is this like a prolonged hermitage? Does it last the entire length of the novel? You never have any slip-ups where you might socialize?
I love that you call it slip-ups. I have the occasional obligatory slip-up, something that I have to do or actually really want to do, and I dread it all day. I just feel this. I wake up in the morning thinking, I have to be somewhere at 7:30 tonight. How am I going to get any work done? And meanwhile, I have the whole day ahead of me, but it's like a psychological impediment ahead of me in the evening that I'm going to have to sort of be public. And I think that's what it is. I think there's a real sort of split in the writerly psyche between interacting with the world and being hard at work. And it's like two different people. It's like Jekyll and Hyde, only I hope there's no whatever the nasty one is.
Socialization.
We work hard at that, I think, as writers. We try very hard to, it's like dogs. We try to please people and not show our real nature, which is to jump up on the counter and eat everything.
Again, in The Great Man, I felt as if, and I might be reading into this, sorry, but I felt as if I found there were some references to Homer. There were the blueberries that could launch ships. There's a very idea of a husband either being dead or away, who was, out and about with other women, whereas the wife was home, very domesticated roles.
I think that you can't avoid, since we are, as writers, steeped in what everyone else before us has written, it's impossible. It's like the voices in your head from your parents or your family or the world or people you're writing about. And it's kind of the same way I can't avoid using real people that I know in my work. And they do or don't recognize themselves, correctly or incorrectly. It's always interesting. But I also can't avoid, we'll call it homage. I like that word. Sort of hearing the voices of other writers as I'm writing, and you try not to. You try to make it your own voice, et cetera, but your own voice is part of a tradition, and it's part of an ongoing dialogue with other writers. And so, yes, I'm sure. I'm sure you're right, although it wasn't conscious. I have to confess, yes.
Is there, or are there any other writers that you find, whether consciously or unconscious, subconscious, depending who you ask, slipping into your writing, into your prose? Do you find there's some influence greater than just what you're saying, but how you're saying it, coming across in your work from someone else's influencers? Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's not a particular writer, but it's all 20th century English novels. And the thing I've always loved about the English novelists is that they have a sort of collective, fluid, witty ease with language. And I grew up reading English novels, and I grew up identifying, even though I've never set foot in England, I grew up feeling very English and both my grandmothers are English, and my family is very literary and all loved English novels, and from Agatha Christie to Jane Austen and, beyond, and Kingsley Amis, and, really, I felt that I came from an Anglophile background, and so if there's a voice that I have to consciously try not to co-opt, if I could, I wish I could, but it's that sort of English, concise, witty, just zingy kind of collective voice that they all have.
We all seem to really be taken by your quote, or your what you said. I guess is a quote now. That literature is like an arrow, and that the narrative should just shoot straight through. How do you feel about writing today? Do you think that we've gone too far from prolix, cerebral writing, or have we found kind of a straightforward narrative, which is the new fiction, the new prose?
Yes, I think so. I think one of the things that has happened since Victorian times, and it's marked, and affects all areas of contemporary, I guess, American or Western life, is therapy. And the idea that we plumb our own psyches and we travel. These are two huge things. We already know a lot of the things that the Victorian novelists felt compelled to explain to their reading audience, like what Egypt looks like. And the mechanism of a thought that I think now there's a shorthand, both for place and in interior life, that enables a novel to really fly along. Novels are shorter now, and I think that's why. I think there's no diminishment of ambition or sort of scope, but I think it's really that we kind of know a lot more, just basic stuff. And I think that the Victorian novelists had to sort of educate their readers. Like, they studied humans, and there wasn't any psychology to sort of, general knowledge. Right. So if novels are shorter and quicker, I think that's why. But I think the great Victorian novels, digressive and weighted with asides and lengthy, especially Henry James, who I actually find somewhat intolerable. Much as
Me too.
I admire him, I can't really read him because he's so in love with the sound of his own voice. And one thing I always feel is that if you fall in love with the sound of your own voice, that arrow just kind of plummets down into the earth. It's all about the story and the characters and letting them take center stage and run the show, and you don't run the show. So that's sort of that's the general rule I have. Like if I feel like I'm really liking what I'm writing, I get a kind of sick feeling like, yeah, I'm going to probably cut this out.
Is it unfair to consider you a feminist, or not in the misunderstood sense of the word, but in a, I guess, second, third, and present sort of wave of feminism? Would you consider yourself a feminist?
I love the way that question is couched. Nicely done. Because it's gotten a bad name, but yes, of course I'm a feminist. I'm a woman, and I want to be treated like men are. That's the basic fundament. Is that the right word? Of feminism. The fundamental aim of feminism is that we should have equal rights and equal pay. I'm all for it.
I do have a question about Maxine listening to Sonic Youth. Is that something that occurs in your family as well? Because I know you said that some of the older characters were based on family members.
I made Maxine up. She's not like anybody I know, but she just seemed like someone who would listen to Sonic Youth. I love Sonic Youth. I think they're fantastic. But she seemed like she'd be cool enough to know who they were and to get it. Yeah.
And also, how long have you been living in New York now?
Since 1989, but I sort of don't live here now.
Live here.
So it's like a pause. Like I'm on sabbatical from New York.
And you said you're in New Hampshire, and is that where you're writing? Is that where you become the recluse? You go to your Walden, you lock the door, and...
It's a farmhouse in the mountains, in the middle of nowhere. It's really great.
But I have to applaud you for someone who wasn't born and raised in New York City for mentioning all 5 boroughs in one novel.
Hey, I didn't even know I did that. Thank you.
That's something that most authors don't do in their career.
Are you guys from Staten Island?
I'm from Staten Island.
See, that's the forgotten borough that no one ever talks about.
I think we're going to have Kate back for a follow-up interview. Or
Staten Island.
Just on Staten Island.
I love Staten Island. Yay, Staten Island.